What's going on, guys? It's David, this is Smart Fitness, and you guessed it based on my entry, we're doing a video on knee collapsing, or better yet, the term valgus and why it happens. Let's jump to it. So as I alluded to earlier in the introduction, we're going to be basically discussing about knee valgus, or for those in like the rehab-based setting, why your knee collapses. So we've got three common reasons as to why this occurs, and that's poor mobility, somebody being new to exercise, and external rotators becoming internal rotators. So let's get to it. Let's learn about knee valgus. Let's get to the honey bunches and oats, the frosted flakes, and all of the cereals that are good, and the physiology of why it happens. Smarty facts. All right, guys, so there's typically three mobility reasons, or restrictions rather, that cause people to have knee valgus. So the first thing we want to look at is their hip mobility. For example, do they have tight hip flexors? Do they have a not adequate way for them to go into external rotation or abduction? Do they have weak adductors, weak abductors? Do they have just general immobility problems in the hip itself? At the same time, you want to work your way down to the joint below, and that would be the knee. Generally speaking, if there is a knee-based problem that's causing valgus, it could be related to problems such as weak tendons, weak muscle belly itself, where there's insertion points, weak ligaments or torn ligaments. And at the same time, you want to look at the ankle itself. So the ankle, generally speaking, when we stand, the ankle stays in two positions, and that's basically on the outside, on the inside, in terms of lateral, forward, and backwards, but it does circulate around in a circumferential type of setup. So generally speaking, when somebody has their knee collapsing in, it could be related to the fact that they're having an inversion or a relative supination of their arch or their ankle itself. And that leads to, as you can see just from me letting my foot collapse in, the knee itself kind of travels in with it. At the same time, if somebody's lacking the ability to keep their foot flat on the ground, that too can lead to problems. For example, if you're squatting in a position where you're up on your toes and you don't really have strong control of what your calf musculature is asking you to do, that can lead to the knees collapsing as well. So generally speaking, again, I'm saying generally because this might not apply to every single individual, look at your mobility from the hips itself, especially the glute structures. Is the glute medius and max doing what they should be doing, acting as external rotators? Are you getting the right support from your quads and hamstrings down towards the knees itself? Are your calves super tight, causing problems from the posterior portion of the back of your leg? Do you have weak intrinsics in the feet itself? Do you have a flat arch in and of itself? Are you even able to create an arch? You need to be asking yourself these things. Moving on. So guys, moving forward into this clip of dynamic awesomeness, the next reason why people may have their knees collapsing in is, simply put, they're new to exercise. Their body doesn't understand the movement patterns in and of itself. So if you take a look at people who have never really squatted before and you watch them, they kind of look like a baby giraffe. Their body's all over the place. They don't really have control of their body with or without a barbell. It's hard for them to figure out what hips below the knees really looks like. So simply put, that could be a cause of your problem. If you've never really squatted before and you don't know the demands of what your body's asking, body weight or under load, that could be leading to why your knees are collapsing in. So the solution to that is, well, as Mark Ripto says, you gotta do your 5x5s and you gotta squat more. Smart particle fact number 3. So when you're asking external rotators to become internal rotators, it might become a normal and very functional aspect of your body to allow the knee to collapse in. For example, if you're looking at the glute medius, not only is it an external rotator, but it's also an internal rotator. Same with the piriformis. So when you're hitting an ass to grass squat, or you're, for example, an ollie lifter who's just caught a clean at the very bottom of your squat, your knees might waver and collapse in slightly. This is not necessarily a problem. In fact, it might be advantageous. So remember that the next time your knees collapse in, wiggle or waver just a little bit. All right, guys, so assuming that your problem is something structural and you're not new to the gym, and it's beyond a mobility problem, it could be a strength-based error as well, we want to look at several ways that we can strengthen you in a dynamic manner beyond that of simply adding more weight on the bar for your squats. So I've laid out 3 different pieces of equipment, 4 if you want to count the bench, and there's essentially looking at a counterbalance squat and a counterbalance lunge where you're going to have your arms straight out in front, and what that's going to result in is the load being displaced on the front portion of you, so you don't have to worry about loading axially, meaning the weight isn't on top of you, and it'll allow you to actually fit into a position that can tolerate loading from a sagittal and a frontal plane, so basically forward and backwards and side to side. At the same time, you want to look at things where you can challenge your external rotators. So I've got this band here, and that's basically going to be used for stuff like monster walks. You can use it for banded glute bridges, banded hip thrust, and that's more or less going to be challenging you to maintain that external rotation and abduction, and then strengthen in those positions. Next, we're going to go into something that I like to call a staple in the majority of my programs, and that is the single leg RDL. We're going to use a dumbbell, but realistically you can do them in a landmine position. You can use a barbell if you have the stability and support for it, but for the purpose of this video we're using a dumbbell. What we're looking for is to offset the leg with the arm to begin, and then aim to have the same arm, same leg being used as a way to challenge stability. But we want to make sure the hips are square. You're really challenging the strength in the glute med and maintaining that external rotation. The last thing is using this bench. Now the bench is a metaphor of something that is elevated. You could theoretically just use anything that is elevated, such as a box, and what we're going for is a way to challenge you where you're focusing on hip flexion and hip extension, so your ability for the hips to travel forward and backwards, and being able to load entirely onto the hip flexors and entirely, or as much as you can, onto those hip extensors. So I hope you guys have found this video informative. I hope it helps somebody with their lifting, and as always, ladies and gentlemen, stay strong. And the final Smart Fitness Smarticle Particle tip is get huge, but do so safely. Don't just constantly put weight on the bar. Don't just be a gym bro. Stay strong, ladies and gentlemen. Stay strong.